Have you ever stopped to think what happens to someone who believes they're invincible? Someone who thinks their power, their wealth, or their position places them above everything, even above God. How often do we humans get lost in pride, thinking we're in full control of life, until the day God decides to step in, and when He intervenes, nothing stays the same. This video tells the true story of Nebuchadnezzar, the most powerful king of the ancient world. A man who dared to challenge the God of Israel and paid a high price for it. But it's also the story of how God's mercy can reach even the hardest of hearts, even that of a tyrant. You'll see how pride can be a man's downfall. You'll learn how God speaks, warns, judges, but also restores. And in the end, this story will speak directly to you, because maybe you, or someone you love, is going through a battle against pride, arrogance, or even against God Himself. So don't leave this video. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this message with someone who needs to hear it. And tell us in the comments, have you ever had a moment where God made you realize you weren't the center of everything? Imagine a golden throne at the center of a vast empire. Before it, servants from every nation bow in reverence, soldiers march in perfect formation, and messengers deliver news of unstoppable victories. Seated high on that throne, with a firm gaze and overwhelming authority, is Nebuchadnezzar, the most feared and respected man in the ancient world. He wasn't just a king. He was the emperor of Babylon, the conqueror of Jerusalem, the ruler who leveled cities, subdued kings, and rewrote history with the might of his sword. Under his reign, Babylon flourished like never before. Towering buildings, luxurious palaces, and the famed Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 wonders of the world. Everything around him screamed glory, dominance, and greatness. But behind that grandeur was something far more dangerous than any army: pride. Nebuchadnezzar looked at all he had accomplished and believed he was a god. Every stone laid, every enemy crushed, every treasure stored, he claimed it all as the work of his own hands. His eyes were blinded by power, and his heart hardened by vanity. This was the man who marched toward Jerusalem with thousands of soldiers and ordered a siege on the holy city. In time, he took the brightest and most handsome of the Hebrew youth captive, among them 4 names heaven would never forget: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, who would come to be known as Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. To Nebuchadnezzar, those young men were nothing more than foreign servants, tools to serve his empire. Little did he know he was bringing into his inner circle vessels of the Most High God, the very God he would one day dare to challenge. The king of Babylon was feared by nations and rulers alike, but he was about to learn that there is a name before which every knee bows and every tongue confesses. A God who is not impressed by palaces or intimidated by armies. And so begins the story of the most powerful man on earth and how he would be brought low by the hand of the God of heaven. Years went by. Babylon remained undefeated, shining like gold under the desert sun. Nobles from across the known world traveled to admire the city that seemed to reach the heavens. And Nebuchadnezzar still sat on his throne, more arrogant than ever, convinced his glory would never end. Then, in a bold act of vanity, the king ordered an audacious construction, a massive golden statue nearly 100 feet tall, a towering image meant to symbolize his own majesty. It was raised on the plain of Dura, a monument to the ego of a man who saw himself as a god. But building the statue wasn't enough. He demanded worship. A decree was issued. At the sound of the trumpet, the harp, the tambourine, and all kinds of music, every nation, tribe, and tongue was to fall down and worship the image the king had set up. Anyone who refused would be thrown alive into a blazing furnace. The king wasn't just seeking obedience, he wanted total submission. He wanted to be worshipped. And with that, without even realizing it, Nebuchadnezzar crossed a dangerous line. He wasn't just exalting himself, he was challenging the very God of Israel. And pride, it blinds. He didn't notice that in the sea of people bowing before the statue, 3 young Hebrews remained standing. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Daniel's friends, refused to kneel. It didn't matter how loud the music played or how threatening the decree sounded. Their hearts belonged to one Lord only, and to him alone they would bow. When word of their defiance reached the king, he was furious. His veins burned with rage. How dare they disobey him, the absolute ruler of the empire? He summoned the 3 young men and confronted them face to face. But there, in front of the most powerful man on earth, those servants of God spoke with unwavering courage. "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it. And even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." Daniel 3:16-18. Those words cut through the king's pride like a blade. In a fit of rage, he ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual and commanded that the 3 be thrown in at once. The punishment would be an example. No one else would dare disobey after this. But what happened next changed everything. Inside the flames, a 4th figure appeared, walking alongside the 3. Their bodies weren't burning, their clothes weren't consumed, and there was a radiant heavenly light surrounding them. Nebuchadnezzar himself, staring in disbelief into the furnace, saw something extraordinary. The sun had barely risen over the plain of Dura, yet the eyes of the entire empire were fixed on one terrifying sight: a roaring furnace, blazing like a wild, untamed beast. The heat was unbearable. Even from a distance, the fiery breath of death could be felt. Inside it, 3 men walked: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Their names were Babylonian, but their hearts belonged to the God of Israel. They held positions of honor in the empire, yet they chose to risk it all rather than betray their faith. They refused to bow to the golden statue, and for that, they were sentenced to die. When Nebuchadnezzar gave the order to throw them into the fire, his rage knew no limits. He commanded the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual. The strongest soldiers in his army tied the 3 men up and threw them violently into the flames. The fire was so intense that even the soldiers who tossed them in were instantly killed by the heat. It was supposed to be the end, a swift, merciless execution, a brutal warning. But God had other plans. Suddenly, in the midst of the fire, something supernatural happened. The king, watching from his royal platform, was struck with shock. He stood up, pointed, and cried out in disbelief. "Weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire?" "Yes, O king," his officials replied. "Then why do I see 4 men unbound, walking around in the fire unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods?" What was meant to be a horror show turned into one of the greatest miracles in biblical history. The presence of God stepped into the flames. He didn't deliver them from the furnace, he met them in it. They weren't spared from suffering, but they were sustained through it. The fire, which should have consumed them, didn't even singe a single strand of hair. Their clothes didn't even smell like smoke. They walked out of that furnace as living proof that there is no other God who can save like the God of Israel. Right there, in front of the whole nation of Babylon, God proved that the faith of the faithful is more powerful than the decrees of kings, that no flame burns hot enough and no command is cruel enough to stop the hand of the Lord. Nebuchadnezzar, humbled in the presence of divine glory, declared, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him. There is no other God who can save like this one." But even with this incredible declaration, the king's heart wasn't fully transformed. He recognized God's power, but he had not yet bowed before him. The furnace had tested the faith of the servants, but the real test for Nebuchadnezzar was still to come. The silence of the night blanketed the royal palace, but that evening Nebuchadnezzar couldn't sleep. Despite the luxury, the soft music, and the fragrant oils spread throughout his chamber, something unsettled his spirit. He tossed and turned on his golden bed, covered in fine linens, until a storm of anxiety consumed him. And then the dream came. He saw before him a majestic tree, massive, stretching into the heavens. Its branches spread across the earth. Its leaves were beautiful, and its fruit abundant. Animals found shelter beneath its shade, and birds built nests among its branches. Every living creature found provision from this tree. It was a symbol of greatness, of dominion, of glory. But suddenly, a voice thundered from heaven, a divine command, clear and terrifying. Cut down the tree, trim off its branches, strip off its leaves, scatter its fruit. But leave the stump, with its roots in the ground, bound with iron and bronze, among the grass of the field. Let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, and let his mind be changed to that of an animal, until 7 times pass over him. The king woke up in a panic. Cold sweat soaked his skin. His eyes were wide open in fear. Something deep within whispered, "This is no ordinary dream. This is a warning." He summoned his magicians, diviners, and wise men, the men he trusted most. But none could make sense of the vision. They felt its spiritual weight, but had no access to the throne of heaven. Their shallow interpretations brought no comfort. Then the king remembered Daniel. Daniel, the servant of the Most High God, the one who had interpreted his previous dreams with divine accuracy, the one who always spoke the truth, even when it could cost him his life. Daniel was brought before the king. Nebuchadnezzar recounted every detail of the dream. Daniel listened in silence, but when the dream ended, his face changed. He stood still, stunned. A heavy spiritual weight fell upon him. He knew exactly what the dream meant and what it revealed about the king's future. The room grew tense. Advisors held their breath. Daniel explained, the dream was a judgment from heaven. Nebuchadnezzar had grown great, exalted himself, ruled over nations. He was the mighty tree. But his pride had put him on a path toward a devastating fall. He would be cut off from the throne. He would lose his sanity. He would live like an animal, eating grass like cattle and dwelling with the beasts of the field. This would last for 7 periods of time, until he finally acknowledged that the Most High rules over the kingdoms of men and gives them to whomever he wills. The tree was still standing, but the roots of pride were already rotting, and the axe from heaven was already raised. The silence that followed Daniel's revelation felt heavier than the very air in the throne room. The nobles dared not move. The king, so used to flattery and praise, now sat face to face with words that cut deep. Not from an enemy, but from a man of God. Daniel had been crystal clear. The great tree in the dream was Nebuchadnezzar, and judgment had been declared. His empire, his glory, his sanity, all of it would be taken away. He would live like a beast, humiliated, until he recognized the absolute sovereignty of the Most High. But the king, with the pride common to the powerful, chose to keep quiet. He didn't explode in anger, nor did he break down in humility. He simply went silent, as if trying to bury the inconvenient truth deep within his soul and pretend it never happened. Time passed. 1 month became 2, then 6. 12 months went by since Daniel's warning, and nothing happened. Day by day, the king likely thought, maybe it was just a dream, maybe I misunderstood. After all, I'm still here. I'm still the great Nebuchadnezzar. And slowly, pride began to take root again, stronger and deeper than before. Then came the fateful day. He climbed up to the rooftop of his palace. From there, all of Babylon could be seen in its glory. The towering walls, the majestic temples, the hanging gardens defying the logic of men. It was like gazing upon the heavens from earth. And with a smug smile of self-glory, the king uttered the words that sealed his fate. Is this not the great Babylon that I have built by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty? At that very moment, before he could even draw his next breath, a voice thundered from heaven, slicing through the air. This is what is decreed for you, King Nebuchadnezzar. Your royal authority has been taken from you. You will be driven away from people and will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like cattle. 7 times will pass over you until you acknowledge that the Most High rules over the kingdoms of men. There was no time to resist. No royal guard could shield him. No army could stand in the way. His mind snapped. Sanity left him. His words turned to madness. And before the horrified eyes of his court, the king of Babylon was dragged from the palace and thrown into the wilderness like a wild beast. Daniel's words, the truth the king didn't want to hear, came to pass with divine precision. Now, the most powerful man alive crawled among the animals, soaked by the dew, with his fingernails growing like claws and his hair matted like eagle's feathers. The man who once thought himself invincible had become a madman. And yet, even there on the floor of humiliation, God's hand never left him. The stump of the tree had been spared. The fall had a purpose. And in the end, there was still hope. And so, the king became a shadow of who he once was. The palace stood empty, the throne grew cold, the royal scepter slipped from the hands of a man who once believed he could never fall. Nebuchadnezzar, the mighty emperor of Babylon, now lived like a beast. Literally, he was banished from human society. No crown rested on his head, no royal robes adorned his shoulders. Instead, his hair grew long and wild, like eagle's feathers, his nails twisted into claw-like talons. He walked barefoot, filthy, soaked by the dew of morning, eating grass like cattle. There, among the beasts of the field, the most powerful man in the world was reduced to nothing. No speeches, no applause, no voices calling him majesty. He groaned, he crawled, he howled. For 7 times, a period the Bible does not specify exactly, but one that represents a full cycle of divine discipline, Nebuchadnezzar endured the deepest humiliation a human could face. But why would God allow this? Because pride is a direct offense to the Lord. It's when man places himself at the center as if he were the source of his own greatness. And God, in his justice, resists the proud. He brings down the exalted. He breaks every form of arrogance that rises up against the knowledge of who he is. Proverbs 16:18 had already warned, pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Nebuchadnezzar fell by the hand of God. And this moment carries a solemn warning for all of us. When man forgets that everything he has comes from the Lord, God may take it all away, so that he will learn to look up once more. But even in the midst of judgment, God's mercy had not disappeared. The stump of the tree had been left behind. There was hope for restoration. The punishment wasn't eternal. It was corrective, a divine call to repentance. And during that time, while Nebuchadnezzar wandered the fields without reason, God was doing something deep within him. His flesh was being humbled, but his spirit was starting to awaken. Every starry night, every lonely dawn, every drop of dew that fell on his skin whispered softly, "You are not God, you never were, but you still have a chance to know him." And when the time of discipline had run its course, something supernatural took place. The heart of the king, once drowned in madness, was touched by heaven. Sanity returned, and with it, a brand new perspective, a new vision. For the first time he lifted his eyes, not to behold his own glory, but to seek the glory of the Most High God. The field was still that morning. Birds sang. The breeze moved gently through the trees, and the sky, clear and endless, looked brighter than ever. Amid the bushes, lying in the dew-covered grass, a man slowly opened his eyes with clarity for the first time in a long time. No guards surrounded him, no trumpets announced his presence. He was alone with God. And in that sacred silence, the madness lifted. His mind returned, his reason was restored. But instead of rising with royal commands, instead of racing back to reclaim his throne, Nebuchadnezzar did something he had never truly done before. He lifted his eyes to heaven, and with a broken heart, he declared from the depths of his soul, "At the end of that time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes toward heaven, and my sanity was restored. Then I praised the Most High. I honored and glorified him who lives forever. His dominion is an eternal dominion. His kingdom endures from generation to generation." Daniel 4:34. In that moment, pride was stripped away, arrogance was cast down. The man who once said, "I built this with my power," now proclaimed, "He reigns forever." Restoration didn't begin with the throne, it began in the heart. And because he humbled himself, God lifted him up once more. His throne was returned, his advisors came searching for him, his honor was restored. But Nebuchadnezzar was not the same man anymore. The one who had once demanded golden statues be built in his image now did something very different. He made a declaration, not to a select few, but to all peoples, nations, and languages. "Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and glorify the King of heaven, because everything he does is right, and all his ways are just. And those who walk in pride, he is able to humble." Daniel 4:37. Yes, God had broken him, but it was in that breaking that his soul was finally saved. The king who once challenged the God of Israel was now a preacher of his sovereignty. Nebuchadnezzar's journey is one of the most powerful and profound in the entire Bible, not just for its drama, but for what it reveals about the human heart and the character of God. As we look at this king who rose from glory to dust and from dust to redemption, we're faced with a mirror that reflects our own soul, ambitious, often arrogant, yet still within reach of divine grace. He began as the most powerful man on earth. His word was law, his empire unmatched, his image worshipped. And yet, in the midst of all that earthly glory, he made the fatal mistake of believing he was untouchable, irreplaceable, unstoppable, as if nothing and no one, not even God, could reach him. That's when pride crept in. It was in that state of self-exaltation that he challenged the Lord, demanding worship, building idols, persecuting the righteous, and ignoring God's clear and merciful warnings. Even after God gave him a vivid, prophetic dream about the judgment to come, he pushed forward in arrogance, until, one day, judgment finally fell, and in a matter of moments, everything he had built came crashing down. His mind shattered, his body transformed, his dignity stripped away. He became like a beast in the field, forgotten by men, but never forgotten by God. And that's where the heart of this story begins to shine, because God's discipline never comes without purpose. The fall of Nebuchadnezzar was not meant to destroy him. It was meant to awaken him, to reveal who truly rules above every throne, every empire, every heart. It was never about Nebuchadnezzar. It was always about the Most High, who reigns over heaven and earth and never loses control, even when men lose themselves. In the end, when Nebuchadnezzar lifted his eyes to heaven, he didn't just regain his sanity. He received a new heart. He recognized the Lord, not just with his lips, but with his soul. He stopped being an idol and became a worshipper, and it was only then that his story found eternal meaning. This narrative teaches us that pride can be more destructive than any external enemy, that ignoring God's warnings can lead to our downfall. But it also reminds us that no heart is ever too far gone for mercy. Even the hardest soul can be broken and rebuilt by the Creator's hands. Nebuchadnezzar's story is, in many ways, the story of all humanity. But it's also the story of a God who never gives up on transforming those he loves, even if that means taking them through fire, shame, and the deepest humbling. So now the question is, where are you in this story? Still standing proud, in the middle of your fall, or finally looking toward the heavens? May God bless you abundantly, and I'll see you in the next video.